What's going on, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Jersey Joe Show. I'm your host, Jersey Joe, and tonight we're going to be talking about the Columbus Blue Jackets. So the Blue Jackets had one of the best regular seasons. I think it was the best in franchise history last year. And to be quite honest, it kind of came out of the blue, to be punny. And the reason I say that is because the year before they had, I think, around 75, 70 points, and this year they had 108, which is the biggest point total increase, even more so than the Oilers had, I believe. And so this team essentially came out of nowhere. A lot like the Toronto Maple Leafs, they weren't thought to be that good. But different than the Maple Leafs, they actually were thought to be contenders for most of the regular season. Unfortunately, they ran into a really hot Pittsburgh Penguins team in the first round. And I do think they kind of regressed towards the mean at the end of the season. But they had a phenomenal season, and I do think that will continue into next year, unlike the Maple Leafs. And so the reason I'm saying that they're going to have the same success next year is because the team largely underperformed the past couple of years. For some reason, I never understood why the media and the pundits were saying that Columbus was going to be, 8th or 7th in the division, that they were going to be a lottery team. If you look at the roster, that they had a great defensive core about 2 or 3 years ago once Seth Jones came in, with Brandon Saad on the team and Bobrovsky playing the way he did. The team was very solid. They really didn't have a lot of star power, but in terms of blue-collar team, they had a fantastic roster, and they, in my opinion, were one of the better rosters in the league. And so last year didn't really come as a surprise to me. I expected them to be making really strong push for the playoffs this year. I expected them, if they played to their potential, which I think they did, to get to the playoffs this year, to get first, second round, even to push for the cup. And so going into next season, I do think that this team will come back. It'll be the same team it always was, or I should say it should have been. I think this is the Blue Jackets that we should have been seeing with Torts for the past 2 or 3 years now. I don't think that this is really an anomaly. I don't think it's a one-off season like it is for a couple other teams. I do think that we saw the real Blue Jackets this year. And so let's take a quick look at their off-season. They had one large trade, and I did talk about this in one of my earlier videos, and that was Artemi Panarin for Brandon Saad. And my opinion on this, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is that it was a good trade for Columbus, not so much for Chicago. But I will get into that later on. On the other hand, they lost a good chunk of their core. They lost Brandon Saad, Sam Gagner, Scott Hartnell, and William Karlsson. Sam Gagner is probably the one that's going to hurt the most, since they didn't really get a lot back from him. Whereas with Brandon Saad, even though they lost him, they get back the 75-point scorer Panarin, which I think is a very good trade for them. That's definitely a step up. And the reason I say it doesn't make sense for Chicago is that he was more of a knee-jerk reaction from Chicago, because he got traded away in 2015. That was the last time Chicago's been past the first round. They won the cup that year. And ever since Panarin's been on the team, they've been knocked out of the first round, and it's getting progressively worse. They lost to St. Louis 2 years ago, and this past year they lost to the Predators and got completely swept. They scored 3 goals the entire series. So just a knee-jerk reaction to change the roster, to change things up, to make it a little bit more nostalgic even. They decided to bring back Brandon Saad, and I know Kane and Taves had a lot to do with that. They really wanted him to come back, and the price you pay for Saad is Panarin. And Saad's not bad at all. He's a 50-point scorer. He scores at a consistent clip too. He's not inconsistent. He's a good two-way forward, but when you have Panarin, who had 34 goals and 40-plus assists last year for 70 points, it's a no-brainer. You make that trade 100 times out of 100. And so, going into next season, I do think that they'll be better offensively, at least on their first line with Panarin, but you lose Karlsson, you lose Hartnell, who I know was a healthy scratch, but he does have a fantastic locker room presence. Every team that's had Hartnell has loved him. He's gone now. You lose Sam Gagner, that's another 50 points you lose. So it's looking a little bit different, but I do think that the Blue Jackets are going to be going into next season with that same drive, with that same core. and they're going to be okay. The only other thing I want to talk about with the Blue Jackets, and much the same with the Maple Leafs, is that going into next season, they're not going to be underrated, and that has a lot to do with how well your season goes. You tend to have teams play your backups against you if you're not that good of a team. You tend to have teams not really rest the night before if they know you're playing you. They underestimate you. They literally will think less of you if you're not a good team, and they won't prep as much, they won't try as hard, making it more dramatic than it actually is, but it really does play a part in this. And so going into next season, Columbus is not going to be taken lightly, and they're now going to be facing the starting goalies. They're going to be facing teams who are well rested now because they're not going to take the team lightly. They understand what Columbus is capable of, and I think you were starting to see that at the tail end of the season, and that's why, I mean, they weren't bad, but they weren't as good as they were during their 16-win streak. And that's because teams were figuring them out, taking them seriously, and realizing that this Blue Jackets team is for real. So, I know they have a lot of up-and-coming rookies. I know Werenski is going to be fantastic for them coming next year, so I don't want to say that they're going to do worse, but I don't think they're going to do much better. I think the best thing you can hope for the Blue Jackets is that they run into a weaker team in the first round, and then get into the second round, and hopefully by then they're so warmed up and so ready to go that they just pull out a couple of wins in the second round and get to the conference finals. I really don't want to say they're going to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. The Metro is just way too stacked. I think Tampa's going to get there over them. I think Washington's going to get there over them. I think Pittsburgh is going to get there over them. So they have a lot of competition. And so I don't think they're going to be middle of the pack or even below average. I do think they'll be one of the better teams in the league. But a lot like a few other teams, they're kind of just stuck behind the leading contenders right now, and there's not a lot of room for them. So we'll see what they do next year. I'm, again, calling it, first, second round playoff exit. They're definitely going to be making the playoffs. I would bet some money on that. But anything beyond that, I wouldn't be too comfortable betting on it. And that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I'm doing one of these every single day for 31 days, doing all 31 teams. So check back tomorrow. Make sure you like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later. Take care.